He teaches regularly at several Bay Area Dharma groups and is active in bringing meditation and Dharma to prisons. He's the co-founder of Sati Center for Buddhist Studies. He has recently completed an 11-month intensive meditation retreat at the Forest Refuge in Massachusetts. Thank you.
So I have a topic. This seems a little loud to me, kind of echoey. What do you think? How is it? Is it good or it's good? Not too much. It's right. Okay. Okay. Maybe pull it down just a little. We'll see. Okay. Anyway, so I have a topic to discuss, but first I just wanted to take a few minutes and see if anyone had any questions. Okay. So the part I wanted to discuss is, I hope it will be short and we'll have plenty of discussion time, and that will be another time if some questions come up later, then there'll be another opportunity. Last month, I took my mother to New York for a wedding, and so there's a lot of family there, and from all over. And one of my cousins came up to me and asked me, "Well, why do you meditate? What's it all about? Why do you do it?" And so, how do you answer that question? It's probably different for all of us. But so I tried a few different things. I don't remember. I said something like, "Well, we create so much of our own suffering." I started that way. He just said, "Well, no, what do you mean?" "No, I don't create my own suffering." He just couldn't relate to that at all. Okay, that didn't work. So I said, I don't remember, things like, well, we tend to live so much of our lives kind of what I call being on automatic pilot. We're sort of like not really awake in the present. We're just kind of almost unconsciously, automatically going through life. He said, "That's ridiculous. What do you mean?" He just couldn't relate to that at all. I tried a few more angles. But he kept coming back, and I was quite happy just to let it go. But he kept the conversation going. And so at one point, and this was a big mistake, I said, "Well, this is all an illusion, don't you?" Which is absolutely true, and I mean, it's a real good illusion. And any of you who've certainly, I don't think meditation practice probably isn't the only way to get direct seeing into that, but it's certainly one way where we can actually see into that deeply. And that was just too weird. And so finally, I asked him, where's the question coming from? What are you trying to find out? And he said, "Or what do you want?" And he said about himself, he said, "My mind won't shut up. My mind just won't shut up." So that was a way then to talk about something that he could relate to, about how we can start to train the mind and how our minds aren't, right? We shouldn't expect our minds to be able to quiet down because we haven't trained them, right? And that's actually is a place where we often get into some suffering in our own practices. We come and we sit down and we think the mind should quiet down, and well, it hasn't been trained, so that's what we're doing. We're training it. But in the beginning, well, of course it's not going to quiet and settle down, right? And an analogy that I think is really good, that I often use, is around physical exercise. For any of you, if you ever go to, say, a gym and want to, I don't know, it could be anything, lifting weights. Or my wife goes to these spin classes at her gym, which are very intense, and she just recently got me to try them. And when I first went in, it was just really, really hard. I wasn't even close. And I've noticed as I've gone in a little bit, I'm not that regular, but I've noticed the muscles have strengthened and my endurance is strengthened, and now it's not so hard and I can more easily do it. When you first go in, you're not trained. I shouldn't expect that I'm going to be there like those people up in the front row, who, really are strong cyclists. But over time, you can develop and can see the real fruit. It's the same thing with our minds, right? We come in and sit down. Our minds are just completely out of control. Matter of fact, it reminds me of a quote from Ajahn Sumedho. This is Ajahn Sumedho. The human habit of clinging to desire is ingrained. We in the West think of ourselves as sophisticated and educated, but when we really begin to see what is going on in our minds, it is rather frightening. Most of us are horribly ignorant. We do not have an inkling of who we are, or what the cause of suffering is, or of how to live rightly. Not an inkling. Anyway, so my cousin and I talked about various things, and that was the doorway in. And the thing that really struck me about that I wanted to bring here was this idea that, there really is there's no one reason that's the reason why someone does or should come to any kind of spiritual practice or does anything in life. And in the Dharma world, Dharma practice is not just formal meditation practice, although that in our tradition that's a pretty big deal. In some branches of Buddhism, it's not. But everything that we include into Dharma practice, why do we do it? So if we were to go around, which we won't do that unless people choose to share later, but there won't be one answer for all of us. We all come for many different reasons. My guess is that for all of us, and maybe this is true for everything we do in life, it would be some version of, in some way, we want to make our lives better. Maybe there's some kind of suffering we have in life, and we're looking for ways to work with it. It could be physical difficulties or mental or emotional or anything. For some of us, maybe we don't know why. We're just drawn to do it. So something pulls us. When you look at so much of what the teaching's about, I think it would draw a lot of people, teachings around cultivating loving kindness and compassion and more wakefulness and clear seeing and more freedom, so we learn to live in a way that creates more well-being for ourselves and others and less suffering for ourselves and others. I think many of us would sign up for those kind of things and think, yeah, that sounds good. And that's really all we're talking about. And then what are skillful means? What are the ways to speak and act and live that supports that and has us grow in those areas? But sometimes when I've heard people say to reflect upon your intention or your motivation for practice, I oftentimes don't have one set concept or phrase or set of words that come up in my mind. I don't know why. It's just infused into life. So what I would like to do is I want to offer 4 very short reflections. And we're literally only going to take about 30 seconds or 1 minute each. I'll just say a few words and just let the words go in and reflect. And just to see what's true for you on the reflection. And at the end, I may say just a little bit, and then I'd like to open it up and see if anybody wants to say anything or share. And so I want to emphasize that I certainly don't have, I'm not trying to, when you get these reflections, I want to be very clear that I'm not trying to suggest what anyone's answer should be. But it's all about just seeing what's true for you. Okay? So the first reflection, and just I would invite you to, if your awareness is not, just to really connect inside. You may or may not want to close your eyes. You don't have to. But just to be kind of connect into mindfulness. And then let the reflection or the question go in. And there may be some words, or there may be just kind of a vague sense of something, however it wants to come out. So the first reflection I'm going to offer in several different ways of saying it, because some people, I find, I've been doing this since I've come back from this wedding with my mother the last few weeks. I've been doing this a few times, and I found that some ways of saying it people relate to more than others. So just pick the sort of the flavor of what I'm saying that connects best for you. So the first reflection is just to reflect upon, one way to say it is that what is most important to you in your life? Or what is your life about? What's it about? Or it could be, what would you like your life to be about? Another way of saying it is to connect with your deepest or highest intention for your life. Or it could be about your deepest motivation in your life. What's most important? What's it all about on the deepest or highest level for you? Okay, that's the first reflection. The second reflection is, are you happy with how you're actually living your life in relationship to that highest or deepest intention or wish? In relationship to what your life is about in the deepest sense? How satisfied are you with how much or to the degree or in what ways you're living? None of us live perfectly in harmony with our highest truth, but just to reflect on, that for all of us there's a gap between what's most important and how we actually manifest. And just to reflect on how wide we think the gap is, maybe is another way to think about it. But just how satisfied we are with that. And it's not a judgment about ourselves. It's just to look and see what's true. That's the second reflection. I know we're going, fairly quickly through these. But you just let it cook, and it might cook for a while, when these questions go in. third reflection is, if there is some dissatisfaction or if there is this gap, just to reflect upon what is it that creates that separation or that gap. Or you may think, what holds you back or what keeps you from living more? I'm not talking about perfectly, but what keeps you from living more in harmony with, or live more deeply or more truly out of or from that place that's most important. What stops you? What pulls you in other directions? If that's true, that may not feel like there's a gap. Okay, that's the third reflection. And then the fourth reflection is, what would support you to live a life that's more harmonious or integrated or connected, that comes more out of, that you live more deeply or more closely connected with your highest intention or what's most important? What would support you? So that's the fourth. Sometimes when I've done these reflections, even though when I do them very quickly like this, I kind of know right away that's what's happened to me. On some levels, I can sort of sense each one. That may not be true for you. But I've also found that then, once I've kind of planted the seed of those questions, then with time, later in the day or over a period of a few days, it might even open up more for me. I find that happens on lots of times when I reflect on something. So that could happen if these reflections are of interest to you. So I just want to say a few comments about it before we open it up for discussion. The first is, I said in the beginning that I did not in any way, I'm not trying to suggest what your life should be about or what should be most important to you in your life. And that is true. However, I would like to add that I'm assuming that this is a selected group, people who have chosen to take this morning to come, of all the things you could be doing, to come to a Dharma center and take some time to practice and talk about the Dharma and reflect. So that, I'm hoping that for all of us, at least a piece of what's important to us in our life is, I just use a very broad term about sort of these spiritual aspects of life, if I can use that term. I'll say it even beyond the word Buddhism or Dharma or meditation, but even more broadly, those kind of qualities. I would hope that even if, it doesn't mean that, for example, our careers shouldn't be important to us. I'm not making a judgment. You have to find for yourself how that is. Or families, or our finances, or our homes, or everything that makes up our lives. But I would certainly hope that whatever the answer is for us in all those areas, that we would want to bring in a piece of, in addition, add a piece around Dharma kind of qualities. Right? Which the Buddha would say was ultimately a liberation through non-clinging. So that's a whole Dharma topic right there, which some of you are quite familiar with, and some that might be a new concept. So we're not going to get into that too much now. And there are a lot of reflections, other reflections that I haven't brought up, but that are meant to actually start to incline the mind more towards Dharma, about reflecting on life and death. Right? Once again, we're not going to go off and have a whole Dharma talk about that, but it might be worth to add in some reflections of putting our life in the bigger perspective, if you will. I would also like to say something about the second and third reflections, which are around how satisfied are you with how it's going, and then what is it, the third reflection, what pulls us away in those areas where we do get pulled away, and to really honor and acknowledge that there's a lot of things that can pull us away. Some of them are external circumstances that pull a lot of our time. So we may have very, very busy lives, for example, that we just get caught up in a lot. There might be a lot of demands and pulls on us. That might be one. And some things we may or may not have choices on what to do about those, or may. We may want to make changes or not. That's just one. And there's also all the internal things that pull us away. And I just want to tell last thing, one story that I tell the story. I've told it here many times. It's my favorite story, and I've said it probably 100 times. I love this story. And it's in one of the prisons when there's a couple of prisons. We have a program down in Soledad at the 2 state prisons down there. And one of the prisons, they often have these lockdowns. This is a level 4 prison, which is the highest security level. And so there's a lot of violence that goes on there. So, there might be a fight, or someone got stabbed, or just whatever happens. There's a threat or something. So everybody gets locked down. So we have a weekly group. And so there was a lockdown that had lasted for 2 months. And what that meant is that you're just in your cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't get out for 2 months. And these cells are small. And they feed you in your cell. You have a toilets right in there. You just don't go out, except twice a week, one by one. Individually, they'll let you come out for, it's like 15 minutes. They walk you over to where the shower is, and you can take a shower, and you go back twice a week. That's it for 2 months. So at the end of the 2 months, the lockdown was over. We could run the group again, and we were back meeting. And so we were going around talking to people, how was it? And some people had have a really hard time, as you can imagine. And then there's a mix. Other people, they just learned to kind of deal with it, and kind of had found a way where they suffered less around it. I'm sure they weren't happy about it. And then I asked people, well, how was your meditation practice going? And one of the guys said, I just couldn't find the time to practice. And then you think, what's he got to do? They do have TVs in there, and I could imagine, it's like, I know for myself, I'm a real sucker for the old westerns that were not the new ones, but I don't know if there are new ones, but the ones that were made like in the 50s, like in John Wayne's time, those kind of westerns, and even a little earlier. I just love them. Even the bad ones, there's something about them, I just love them. And so I remember once, sometimes, I remember when I was working this one job, I'd come home and I'd be tired at night and get ready to go to bed, but just to turn my brain off, I found TV it was just great. You turn it on, it kind of helped me relax, just turn my mind off. I was too tired to read, to do anything, and I would flip around these channels and find like those old movies. I remember once it was, I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, I was watching this movie, one of these westerns. I had seen it twice before, and it was not a good one. And I was still noticing I was sucked into this thing. It was pulling me away. And I was even said to myself, Shankman, you're going to be, in the morning, you're just going to be tired. And it's not even good. But I was just pulled into this, watching this stupid Western. And so it's just an area to reflect on. Sometimes things just pull us. And so it's useful to reflect on what's most important to us, I think. To really notice that it's easy to get pulled away. So, for example, this guy, and also to acknowledge that it's just kind of part of human nature. That even, you might say to yourself, oh, well, if I was in a prison cell like that, I'd just meditate all the time and I'd really go deep in my practice. I mean, that may or may not be what you would think, but if so, well, maybe. Or maybe you'd be watching, the fifth rerun of some old I Love Lucy that's coming on because it just pulls the mind. So just not to beat ourselves up, but to acknowledge that it's just how it is. Things pull us. And it's not easy. So anyway, I'm going to stop there and just open it up if anybody has any. Could have some questions, but also if you had anything you wanted to share or say. Yes.
Thank you very much for asking those questions. A couple of things.
I think they want you to wait for the microphone. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, thank you for asking those questions. So one of the things about what brings me the most joy is when I feel like I disappear. I work as a therapist and also an educator, and there are times when I can see that the skills and the knowledge that I've accrued just is in the service of the conversation, and there's no me. And then, half an hour later, I'll kind of reflect on it and say, oh, that is so interesting that I wasn't even conscious of what was happening, but there was something in the interaction that just unfolded.
Yeah.
And then the other question, one of the other questions that you asked, like, where's the dissonance or the tension for me? I feel like, okay, I'm 58 years old. I'm ready to retire. I'm ready to live in Kauai and go body surfing every day and eat papayas, but I'm a householder and I'm raising 3 children. And so the place where the tension is for me is in bringing myself back to, okay, well, this is the choices that you made. Be here with that. Don't keep on looking ahead and saying, well, that's where I'd like to be.
Yeah. No, and I really appreciate what you're saying, and it really points to the whole place of course, if you're raising 3 children, it's not like a choice. People do walk away from their children, but for most of us, it's probably not a choice of what you're doing. But also, it just points to that place of where in life do we have some choices, and we may or may not make changes if we could. And then there's the places where we don't have choices, and when is it time to make a choice, or when is it time to sort of be with things as they are? It just brings up that whole thing.
Well, the one thing that I have learned in the last couple of years is to bring in those things that bring me pleasure and not wait. Not wait until the moment that I'm on retirement, but actually to do the things that are really joyful now.
Yeah. So thank you. That's great.
Is it on? On the fourth one, what is it that's keeping you from?
The fourth one was what would support you.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, it's the one that would what.
Okay, the fourth one.
Please go ahead. Sorry.
All right. And the thing that came to my mind was to try harder. And then I thought, but there must be something more than that to it. But I couldn't think of anything else. So I think maybe that's the way I approach things: is to try harder. But what else is there?
Yeah. Are you asking a question, or are you just making a statement?
It's a question.
Oh, well, when you talk about try harder, I'm not sure. There's a lot of different nuances to. There are, of course, places, and it's appropriate sometimes to try harder. In general, now, so I don't know specifically how I don't know you, so I don't know how that applies. But I think also it's important to recognize that sometimes we want to try harder, but we keep getting the same result, or it's not giving what we want when we try harder. And what's actually not needed is not necessarily to try harder, but maybe it's a change in perspective, or to see if I say for all these years I keep thinking I need to try harder, but I'm still, whatever I wanted hasn't changed. Well, what's been the block there? What's been changing? Because one of the things that's important to remember is that one of the most important ways where this practice is working on our conditioning, the conditioning of mind. It's changing the way our habitual patterns, in Buddhism we use the term conditioning, it's changing them and then ultimately leading to a place to free us from our conditioning. And we all know that if you've ever tried to change a habit, in the beginning, how hard it can be. I know that when I was a teenager, I used to bite my fingernails. I haven't done it for most of my adult life, but when I was a teenager, I used to bite, and it was a habit, and I wanted to stop. And I noticed that there was sort of that, I would be unconscious about it, I wouldn't be aware, and I kept thinking I need to try. But the habit's deeply ingrained. And so it took a long time it was just bringing actually as I reflect back, the best I can remember it wasn't trying harder, but it was just more, as I brought the intention there to make the change, it just started bringing more awareness around the process. And I think in that case, it doesn't mean that there's not a time to try harder, but in that case, and I think it's true many times, it's just by bringing more awareness to things that there's sort of a self-liberating or self-transformation that can start to happen. So I started to notice that I would just find that sometimes I'd be biting my fingernail, but I would sort of wake up in the middle of that and be aware of what I was doing rather than just sort of unconsciously having gone through it. And then I started to notice more. And as I started to notice more, that slowly started changing the condition or the habit to get to the point where I'd start to notice when the urge would come ahead of time. Maybe I would still bite the fingernail because it was still a strong impulse, but I was starting to become more and more aware. And just through that, I think there's something about just becoming more awake and aware, and then we bring that to whatever's going on. And then that helps us also be more tuned into when is it time to make more effort and when is it time to... sometimes the thing that's needed is less effort too, of course. So there's a lot that could be said around this whole thing of efforting.
Thank you.
I found that along those same lines, it's sort of like being lost in a forest, going along the path that gets darker and darker, and figuring that must be the way to go. And it gets worse and worse. And so often, the thing to do is just to stop right there and maybe get into a little analysis a little bit, turn around and find maybe it's often going the opposite way we're going. And it's, like you say, it's just a matter of changing our position, our approach. Whereas if I try harder, say this must be the way out, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And if I go a little further, maybe I'll find it and it gets worse and worse. But I keep stubbornly going in that direction, where I just have to stop, turn around, and take a deep breath, and go the other way.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and it just reminds me that I think one of the most basic statements possibly that we could make is that this idea of freedom or liberation or enlightenment or whatever term we might use, if that's a real possibility, it certainly hinges upon, is dependent upon, our ability to be mindful and awake. To the extent we're not mindful, to the extent we're on, as I call it, being on automatic pilot, we have no freedom or choice In those moments, we are simply acting out the habitual patterns, the conditioning of our mind. So we have a certain stimulus, certain inputs, certain experience, certain things happen. And then we have whatever way that we just our natural response and reaction to that. And we're just playing that out. It's just like the machine is running through its programming. It may be, and hopefully in a lot of areas of our lives, that unconscious habitual way of responding and acting maybe gets us by okay, and it's not necessarily a problem. And then we probably all have areas, I know I certainly do, where you still get caught, where that habitual reactivity doesn't necessarily always lead into the best way. But to the extent, and that's one of the big things we're practicing here about becoming more awake, more mindful, more clear, as that happens, it's from that place that then we start to have more choice and those seeds of freedom sprout from. So it's real important to keep that concept in mind.
Thank you. That was very helpful. It inspired me to say what I'm about to say, so here it comes. While you were speaking, an image came to me of a lot of people have seen the movie Matrix, The Matrix. Well, this image flashed to me where these guys were sitting inside this space, I don't know what it was, I guess it was a fast-moving magical machine that travels all over the place. Anyway, but these guys are sitting there and they're watching this panel, this like lights, these little words and symbols that are going by right in front of them, you know? And they're kind of like, these guys are interpreting it, like their minds were able to pick out where something was happening over there, and this sector was doing that, whatnot. And this image came to me that, you know what, this is like in meditation. We're sitting here in this quiet place and we're letting things, if you will, go by. Visitors, Tanjeff likes to call them visitors, of thoughts, feelings, emotions, things that we allow to be there. And because we're, in a sense, trying to wake up and to become less affected by the ignorance that's, all around us, we can then make better choices. Anyway, that kind of made me get a sense that, what are we doing inside? And anyway, for me, that fits for just a simple analogy of what am I paying attention to when it arises within me? What am I capable of seeing, and then watching that reaction I have to it? Am I caught by it? Do I want to go play with it, or am I repulsed by it? What is that? And anyway, so it just feels like a way of investigating it, seeing it a little differently. That was it.
Thank you. So why don't we take one more and then we'll end.
Hi, I'm fairly new. I just started coming here, and so I have a question for you. The last question you posed, I didn't have an answer. I was like, I don't know.
Of what would support you?
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know. So what could be a good way for me, for anybody else to start answering the question? What could be a good beginning?
Well, so that's a great question. What would be supportive? So I will say two things about it. One is, of course, depending on what aspect of your life you're talking about, because this question could have, it's sort of built in that it's kind of a Dharma question and it's around those Dharma aspects of our lives, but it's actually whatever came up for each person, right? So if what's needed is that, I really want to be a writer and I'm trying to write. It's not about Dharma practice or whatever, and I need to find time to do my creative writing each day and everything. But then it would be looking at that and reflecting and see, well, what would be supportive? Would it be getting with a group of writers who get together regularly to write? Or would it be making a special place in a corner, or making time when I tell my partner or my spouse or my children, for 15 minutes, don't disturb? Or I don't know. There's just many things. Just to look and see. I think a lot of it comes out of what pulls us away and what we want. So I don't know the answer for you. But one of the things I want to suggest from a Dharma point of view, that there's several things that are sort of general answers that may be helpful to you. That are kind of the standard answers we give, but I think they're standard because it's what many people find. So around the Dharma, first of all, some people naturally connect with groups more than others. Some tend to want to be more kind of in their own, and some with groups. But I would say, just like coming here today, here we are all together doing this practice, I think that many people find that, we use this word Sangha, which has had a lot of meanings over time, but certainly for now we're meaning it to you. It means this community of people who come together, of practitioners. So many people find that connecting with community, to whatever level works for you, whether it's showing up once in a while or on a regular basis, or actually getting involved in the community or finding the activities, that can be very supportive. It's a structure. And there's other people around. Many people find from meditating, especially when they're newer to it, that there's something that really happens about sitting in a group. Even if you're sitting with your eyes closed and the room's perfectly quiet, it's really a different feeling, much different than just being at home by yourself meditating. So finding support in community or groups or things like that. Other things that can be supportive can be different readings, if you relate to that, finding some books, or just one or two. It doesn't have to be a library full, but a few readings that can be inspiring and where you can learn and just get inspiration that way. And then another thing that can be helpful is, even if you're not connecting with a Sangha on that level, certainly either finding some spiritual friends or a teacher or teachers can be very supportive, who you can bounce things off with, talk to occasionally, set up an interview time or something. All these different things are possibilities that could be helpful. And then, I don't know if that's useful or not. Okay. So we have to end. It's actually 11:15 right now, which is the ending time. And so I'm just going to it's going to be very short, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to end with some metta, some loving kindness just to end. But if you need to leave, since we're going late by about 3 minutes, please don't feel weird about it or anything. Just get up and go and take care of yourself, and that's fine. And for those who are going to stay, what I invite you to do is, so what can happen sometimes for some of us is when there's a discussion like this, it can pull us into concepts, thinking, and we're out into the room of the discussion. So if that's happened, I would invite you just to notice that and then bring your awareness back, connecting back inside to yourself. So to the extent you can, without making a struggle about it, but just in a real soft, easy way, trying to drop out of the concepts. You won't be able to do this 100%, but into the actual experience, the embodied experience of just being here, of sitting here. Experience in the body. There may or may not be some emotions or thoughts or feeling tone or moods. But just connecting with that whole range of your experience. Not having to do anything with it. You don't have to calm it down or change it, but just allowing the awareness to just connect. And just to see what's there. And then I also would invite you to notice, how are you holding that experience? Or another way to say it, what's the relationship you're having with whatever your experience is right now? see if there can be a sense of allowing, just letting yourself be, letting that experience be, of acceptance. And if there is something or some place or some aspect of your experience that you find you're not able to hold with some acceptance, then bring some acceptance for that place. And then it's out of that place of from a self-acceptance that we can start to send some of that loving kindness to ourselves, that metta. And so it could be a felt sense, or it could actually be a thought or a wish or a prayer. You could actually repeat. Actually, you can make up your own words, but the classical words that we always use are very simple, and you could just repeat silently to yourself, "May I be happy." It's very simple. Just repeating that wish. May I be healthy. May I be safe, free from both inner harm and outer harm. May I be peaceful. And this metta practice, doing metta, loving kindness practice for yourself, that could be your whole practice for a long, long time. It would be very powerful and very, very fruitful. So you can stay with that if you'd like, or you can allow your awareness to expand out, so to send that metta to all the others here in the room. You could say the same wish or prayer. May everyone here be happy and peaceful. May everyone here be free from suffering. And then you could allow your awareness to radiate out beyond this built room and building, and it could go out into the community, into the world and beyond, so that we radiate out this loving kindness in all directions to all beings everywhere. Just as I wish to be happy, may all beings be happy. And just as I wish to be free from suffering, may all beings everywhere be free. And then finally, to end with this prayer from the Metta Sutta. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. So, thank you all very much.